Democracy, democracy, democracy. It's the only issue that matters right now. It's true for the women of Iran who have been protesting for their freedoms. Today, I'll speak with two Iranian-American writers about the demonstrations there and the fight for democracy in Iran. And as for the fight here, could Democrats be doing a better job messaging? I'll speak with President Obama's former speechwriter, because these midterms could be the last free and fair elections this country ever holds. So, let's start today there. Let's start with the midterms. It's shocking. It really worries me just how many smart, well-read people don't appreciate the current threat to democracy. They don't take it seriously. I started my day a bit earlier than usual, going on Morning Joe to debate author and scholar Shadi Hamid. It was a sort of follow-up to the debate he and I had on this show the other day about democracy and fascism. And I want to highlight something Shadi said on Morning Joe.
When people say that these are the most important elections of our lifetime, that's always a telltale sign that the stakes are too high, because it shouldn't be the most important election of your lifetime, and it probably isn't. A lifetime is a long time to live.
No. Sorry, no, that's wrong. This clearly is the most important midterm election of our lifetime. These midterms, less than 2 weeks away, will determine who controls Congress and who takes crucial state election posts, which in turn could both determine whether or not the next presidential election is free and fair, is certified by Congress. And these worries aren't hyperbolic. Over half of all Republican midterm candidates deny or question the 2020 results. That has never happened before in modern American history. And if you think Congress is slow these days to pass legislation that could shore up our democracy, remember the whole Freedom to Vote Act stuck in the Senate? Well, you definitely don't want to see Republicans take control of the House or Senate then. A GOP majority in either chamber would effectively end Biden's legislative agenda, would end any attempts to protect voting rights. Just imagine how much worse things could get as well with the GOP in charge of elections, the election process in states across the country. Already, we have armed vigilantes intimidating Arizona voters at ballot drop boxes. These are not hypothetical or theoretical concerns. Yet still, many Americans don't get that our democracy is in imminent danger. The latest Monmouth poll asked Americans about the most important issue for them this election. 46% said inflation, only 38% said that elections and voting were the most important. And we see this in poll after poll. Voters again and again put gas prices above the future of democracy itself. Whose fault is that? Well, plenty of blame to go around, but the media, my industry for starters. Take Tuesday night's debate in the Pennsylvania Senate race. You have Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman as the Democratic nominee against TV personality and Jersey boy Mehmet Oz, the Republican nominee endorsed by Donald Trump. This is a crucial Senate race that could decide control of the upper chamber. And some of the media coverage of it, reaction to Fetterman, was just embarrassing. News outlets focused on all the wrong things, writing ad nauseum about Fetterman's speech and his recovery from a stroke. And yes, a candidate's health is a legitimate issue in any race, but maybe not the most important issue in this race. So what was the most important moment from their debate last night? Was it Fetterman's confusing, if not outright deceptive comments on fracking?
But there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all." So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I do support fracking.
Not quite the most important clip, though it wasn't great for Fetterman. Also important, but not the most important, were the backward and appalling comments on abortion from Dr. Oz.
As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
I mean, That's ridiculous. Specifically wanting to include local political leaders in a woman's decision about an abortion. Yeah, of course you want the local state rep in the room with you and the doctor. But that's still not the headline from the debate, in my view. The most important moment from Tuesday's debate should have been this moment.
Donald Trump has supported you. He has endorsed you. Why won't you fully commit to supporting him in 2024?
Oh, I do. I would support Donald Trump if he decided to run for president.
All right.
But this is bigger than one candidate. This is a much bigger story about how we are going to build a bigger tent to let more Americans feel safe.
Are you concerned about the ongoing legal investigations involving the former president? 30 seconds, sir.
I haven't followed them very carefully. I've been campaigning pretty aggressively.
That is the moment that we in the media should be focusing on, reporting on, informing viewers and readers about. Because the Republican nominee for the Senate in Pennsylvania just said he'll support a guy who summoned a mob to prevent the peaceful transfer of power in the United States of America. That is the definition of extremism. And that is what many of us in the media keep losing sight of. We cannot normalize Trump or the return of Trump, given what he did last time round in front of our eyes. But then again, you can't place blame only on the media. When the Democratic Party itself, which is supposed to be running against Trump and the Republicans, the Democratic Party is not clearly focused on and talking 24/7 about the threat to democracy. That poll I just showed you about democracy versus inflation, maybe voters are prioritizing the economy over extremism because Democratic Party candidates are, because Democratic Party candidates are not prioritizing the battle against extremism. Take this example from Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan, who's running for re-election in New Hampshire. This is what she said Wednesday morning when asked about opponent Dan Bolduc's anti-democratic extremism.
Look, my opponent is really, really extreme and has been embracing all sorts of conspiracy theories. But I want to bring this back to what the people of New Hampshire should understand about the impact of his extremism and his election denial as a part of that extremism, what that means for them. Look, when you have somebody with extreme views like Don Bolduc that are way out of step with where Granite Staters are, eliminating Social Security, enacting a national abortion ban, among other things.
Sorry, what? Hassan's opponent, Dan Bolduc, has said stuff like the COVID vaccine contains Bill Gates' microchips and that Donald Trump really won the 2020 election. But instead of explaining the danger of Bolduc's conspiracy theorizing, the threat that he poses to our democracy, Hassan immediately pivots back to so-called kitchen table issues. This is not a normal election. So people need to stop treating it as if it is one and stop patronizing voters and assuming they won't care or understand what's at stake. Our democracy, that is what is at stake in these midterm elections. And unless we all face that head on, the extremists win. Joining me now, Molly Jong-Fast, host of the podcast Fast Politics with Molly Jong-Fast, and Wajahat Ali, columnist for the Daily Beast and author of Go Back to Where You Came From and other helpful recommendations on how to become American. Thank you both for coming back on the show. Molly, why is there this assumption amongst certain pundits, certain politicians, that voters don't care about democracy? Why does everything always need to be pivoted back to the economy?
I don't know is the truth. I mean, in my mind, it seems like that should be the most important issue. If it's our last election, that seems important and kind of shocking. And if you look at some of these deniers, like for a great example is Kari Lake, right? She's running in a swing state. She will be the governor of that swing state in 2024. If she wins, think about what that looks like, right? Her entire platform has been election denialism. So in my mind, that seems like a bigger deal. But I just think that the mainstream media is not focused on democracy as sort of the central tenet of what we're all doing here. And I'm not quite sure why.
Waj, candidates, journalists, everyone needs to be doing a better job making clear what's at stake in this election. As Molly points out, democracy is not a priority. Even where media organizations have democracy beats, and now they have reporters covering democracy, elections, voting rights, it's just one among many issues rather than being the overarching issue that everything else depends on.
Well, look, historically, the road to fascism has been paved by those who are in power and mainstream institutions. And specifically, some of the people that you mentioned aren't that bright. They've been wrong about everything. They were wrong about the war on terror. They were wrong about the 2008 recession. They were wrong about Trumpism. And they're wrong about the threats to democracy right now. It's an incestuous ecosystem. To quote George Carlin, it's a big party and you ain't invited, America. And this group of folks, politicians, folks in the media, right, they want access, they want ratings, they want power. And to them, this is great business. It's like a sport. That's how they treat it. For the rest of us, however, especially poor folks and people of color and minorities, we're like the Paul Revere's ringing the alarm saying, hey, 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 this is a threat to our democracy. And instead of being like, embraced like Paul Revere, they shoot us instead, right? They shoot the messenger. And you're absolutely right, Mehdi, that this is a threat to our democracy right now. I'm old enough to remember that Donald Trump, the Republican president, actually ordered a freaking coup. That's an ongoing coup where his mob came out and took over the U.S. Capitol. A majority of Republicans right now, Mehdi, believe in the big lie. They believe in the white supremacist conspiracy theory. They believe in QAnon. We literally have Dana Loesch right now openly saying, I don't care if Herschel Walker aborts anything. I want power. You got Mitch McConnell literally saying, I have no litmus test. And you have Republicans right now praising Franco the fascist. How do you think this is going to end? I just want Democrats to have a spine and punch the bully in the face to bring finally a knife to a knife fight and not just bring a pencil. But unfortunately, this is where we are.
It's not going to end well. It's the short answer to your rhetorical question. And I think the problem here, of course, is recognizing the nature of the threat, recognizing who Trump is and what he did, and then looking at some of these candidates running for office, and they're endorsing Trump, they're backing Trump, they're supporting Trump. That should be a much bigger story. Mehmet Oz being a classic example in Pennsylvania. He was created by Trump and Fox. He wouldn't have got to where he was without that support. And now he's saying he'll back Donald Trump again. He was also asked, Molly, during the debate about accusations that he's used his TV show in the past to push potentially dangerous or bogus treatments. He's very similar to Trump in that sense, with the TV background and the dodgy grifts. Have a listen to that exchange.
Did you or your company make a profit from promoting those products? You have 30 seconds.
I never sold weight loss products as described in those commercials. It's a television show. Like, this is a television show.
Molly, he says, this is a television show. Aside from, clearly this is all just a performance for Dr. Oz, who's very comfortable in front of a camera in a way that John Fetterman isn't, is that a reminder of the weird nature of American authoritarianism? That its faces are Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, Donald J. Trump. It's kind of celebrities, a celebrity face on a very old and dangerous ideology.
Well, I think we're in this post-truth Republican Party, right? So Republicans don't really need to tell the truth because their voters don't expect it, right? We've seen videos of Dr. Oz selling everything from tummy tea, right? Like, there's endless information about him being involved in sketchy medical, things and advertising them on his show. But it doesn't matter because his supporters will believe whatever he says, and this right-wing media will support it. So he is free to lie, and you're seeing that in a lot of these Republican debates. I mean, you saw that with Vance, too. I mean, they sort of deny stuff which has been reported and is clearly true. And because the voters don't care, it doesn't matter, right? It's created a sort of loop of post-truth-ism, which doesn't matter. So you end up having only Democrats being held to, the sort of truth. And so you have a Herschel Walker who's celebrated when he can get out a sentence, and a John Fetterman who's destroyed when he, stammers a little bit.
Waj, how would you explain the phenomenon where Herschel Walker, in a debate in Georgia, manages to speak half a sentence and everyone says, wow, he exceeded expectations. But when John Fetterman, recovering from a stroke, speaks half a sentence, everyone says, he's maybe not ready for high office. Why are Republicans always being graded on a curve?
Yeah, that's an excellent example, which is a microcosm of how all of our mainstream institutions have always bent the knee to the bad faith right-wing Republican operatives who work the refs and always whine and complain. And this is what happens when you engage in a both sides false equivalence between two parties where there is no symmetry. Where, like, as you said, one party is now committed to fascism, that's the GOP and the right-wing activists, and one party is barely hanging on to democracy. So Herschel Walker, who, by the way, should be asked, how many kids do you have, Herschel Walker? And how many abortions have you paid for? And we should give him 3 chances just to get it right, because the bar is so low. Herschel Walker doesn't vomit or trip over himself or faint, and he's now seen as like a prophet and a scholar. And here's John Fetterman, who's recovering from a stroke, ladies and gentlemen, who obviously has openly admitted that, he's struggling, but we grade him to not only a curve, we just annihilate him and decimate him, as you showed in your opening. And this is what happens when all of our mainstream institutions play it down the middle for sake of access, profits, rating, and to be neutral when there is no neutrality, when one party literally is supporting a man who led a coup. This is why it's so dangerous, and this is why so many of our colleagues have to be biased, Mehdi, in favor of democracy. We have to be biased in favor of democracy right now.
It's a line we've said on the show many times before. You cannot be neutral on democracy, and you should be proud to have a bias in favor of democracy. Molly, you spoke with Vice President Harris on your podcast. You asked her if democracy could survive a second Trump term. Let's have a listen to what she said to you.
About democracy in terms of what it does to protect individual rights and freedoms and to enforce civil rights and human rights and justice. Right? When a democracy is intact, it is very strong in that way in terms of what it does to protect the rights of its people. On the other hand, and here is the duality, democracy is also extremely fragile. It will only be as strong as the willingness of its people to fight for it.
Molly, the big question historians will ask, did Biden and Harris do everything they could do to fight for democracy?
I think the question we'll all ask, hopefully we won't ask it because hopefully democracy will survive. But the question certainly is that. And I think, look, I think a mistake that Democrats made was supporting these anti-democracy candidates in the primaries. And it didn't happen in a lot of places, but it did happen in some places. And it hurt the case against these people. And I think it was a mistake. Now I think we are in these last midterms and if there are people like a Kari Lake or, there are a couple of other of these governors in Wisconsin and, different places where they really aren't going to support democracy and the democratic norms, that needs to be like the central closing message. I mean, I'm more concerned about that than I am about Democrats losing other institutions. Like, I think as long as we have free and fair elections, we have, Democrats have a chance to win things back. It's when that stops happening that we're all in a lot of trouble.
Wajahat, last question to you, 30 seconds left. You and I have talked about representation before, Muslim representation. Dr. Oz could end up becoming the very first Muslim senator in the United States Senate. Is that the representation we were looking for?
On behalf of all Muslims around the world engaging in the race draft, we drop Mehmet Oz. And as a South Asian, we also drop Kash Patel and Dinesh D'Souza. Beware buyer. This is not the representation we want. We don't want a token who supports Trump, who promoted the Muslim ban. We want quality candidates who fight for democracy and the rest of us.